It's really interesting, just the idea of using diet or exploring diet as a potential treatment for certain diseases. And I want to dig into that. But why don't we start out by just describing for people, what is the diet that you looked at and what is the diet? Yeah, what's it composed of?
So we work in a lab setting, so we could design diets that were matched in their different components, and other components we could change. So we had controls, and we could use diets that we specifically designed. So we designed 6 different diets, and these diets had constant protein levels, and they only varied in their fat to carbohydrates ratio, to the basically fat to sugar ratio. And what we found, so we fed mice these 6 different diets, and then we induced colorectal cancer in few different models. So we have in the lab the ability to make or to have the mice develop colorectal cancer. And these mice were fed the 6 different diets, and then we looked at the consequences. And what we
found, you can just get turn on colon cancer in certain mice?
Yeah, there are ways.
Yeah, how does that work?
So there are a few ways to do it. You can induce colorectal cancer by using transgenic mice, or mice that have mutations in tumor suppressor genes. And you can induce colorectal cancer by a more inflammatory mechanism, by injection of a carcinogen and then inducing inflammation. So it will be an inflammation derived cancer. So there are a few ways. They vary in their duration and slightly the outcome, the size of the tumor. So, but at least in this particular project, we used all the available models that we had. So the observation that we had could be verified across different models.
So what was so you had these 6 different diets, all protein matched. They basically only differ in the ratio of carbs or sugar to fats. And you've got these different models of colon cancer, these different types of mice that are susceptible to colon cancer. So you induce cancer in these mice, in each of the groups getting each of the different diets. And what was the basic result?
So we could follow the mice at different time points, because we have in our lab a mouse endoscope, so we can perform colonoscopies on these mice and follow the progression of tumors throughout the experiment. And what we found is that the mice that were fed the diets that were very rich in fat and very low in carbohydrates, they hardly developed any tumors. And the tumors that they did develop were significantly smaller in size. If we just look at the fat content of the diets that we used, the percentage of fat varied between 0.3 all the way to 90% fat. And we found this protective effect in the diets that had 90% fat.
90.
90. Yeah. And these diets are called ketogenic diets. As I'm sure many people now know. It became a very popular diet over the last few years. And these ketogenic diets, they are very, very high in fat, and they are low in carbohydrates. They have enough proteins and calories, and these kind of diets were originally developed in the 1920s as a treatment for epilepsy, and specifically in kids that didn't respond to regular medications. They were put on a ketogenic diet, and in the majority of the cases, it significantly improved the outcome in these patients.
So you find this interesting effect with tumors when you're having a ketogenic diet, 90% plus fat. You have this sort of anti-tumor effect in mice. Ketogenic diets used to treat epilepsy, so something interesting is going on. What actually? So when you're consuming a genuine ketogenic diet, how do you know that physiologically? What's going on in the metabolic processes of the body that changes?
So ketogenic diet is called ketogenic because it induces the production of ketone bodies in our body. And ketone bodies are small. They are molecules that are derived from fat, and they provide energy to tissues when glucose is not available. So when you consume ketogenic diet, the level of glucose is really low because we consume less sugars. And then different organs in our body, including the brain, they need to get their energy somewhere. So some of the tissues in our body, they cannot get enough energy by just metabolizing fat. They cannot metabolize fat, and they need to have this alternative source of energy. And our bodies, and specifically our liver, can take these fats, and by different mechanisms and oxidation processes, these fats can be converted and made into ketone bodies. And these ketone bodies can now go all the way to the brain and give the brain enough energy in these cases where glucose is not available. So these are compounds that are very energy rich, and they provide energy to these other places when glucose is not available.
I see. So when sugar's not in abundance, the body needs to get energy from somewhere. That energy is stored up in this fat, but it sounds like it's not in like the best format for all the cells of the body. Yeah. So the liver turns some of the fat into ketone bodies, and those ketone bodies then like go through the blood and get into the brain, and then they're used to run neurons and things like that.
Yes, we cannot function without an active brain. So these ketone bodies are a way of getting the required energy to the brain and to the periphery. It's basically an alternative source of energy.
And this state, like when you are doing this and creating these ketone bodies, that's what they call ketosis.
Exactly. Yeah, and you can get to a state of ketosis either by consuming ketogenic diet, but you can also get to a stage of ketosis when you are fasting for long periods of time or starvation. And these ketone bodies are produced by fatty acid beta oxidation of fats that are coming from the food.
And how much does it matter what kind of fat? Like, is it any kind of fat, saturated, unsaturated, polyunsaturated? Does that stuff matter?
Yeah, so it does matter. In the case of ketogenic diets, it is recommended to consume mainly unsaturated fats and less of the good fats like avocado and olive oil. But I think that the main point here is not really what kind of fat you consume, but how much carbohydrates you bring into the system. Mm-hmm. So it's mainly the low glucose levels that drive the formation of ketone bodies.
I see. So it's a high fat diet. Maybe doesn't matter so much. What is critical is that it's low sugar, low carb.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And how much does like protein matter? Like, could you go into a state of ketosis if you were having a high fat, high protein diet that had low carbs?
No, I think this is the diet that is called Atkins diet. It's a different kind of diet that was designed in the 70s for weight loss. And this diet also has restriction of carbohydrates, but it doesn't restrict proteins or calories in general. So in this kind of diet, you will not go to a state of ketosis so quickly. So the main key here is to give a lot of fat, limit protein consumption, and reduce carbohydrate consumption. So if you look at the fat content in relation to carbohydrates, it's the traditional ketogenic diet is called 4:1 ratio. So you will get 90% of your calories from fat, 8% from proteins, and only 2% from carbohydrates.
I see. And so if you have too much protein, even if you're doing high fat, low carb, you won't go into ketosis. Is that because the proteins are getting used to make something other than ketone bodies?
Yes. You can break proteins to make energy. It will be a parallel process. And when you consume ketogenic diet, that has limited amount of protein. The major source of energy is fat, will come from fat.
And how fast is this process? So let's say that you're eating a traditional Western diet today, and then you listen to this podcast and you're like, all right, tomorrow I'm going to go on the ketogenic diet. How long will it take your body to make that switch and go into ketosis?
Just a few days.
A few days. And do people obviously you can measure it physiologically. It has effects in the brain that maybe we'll talk about in a little bit. Do people report that they feel different?
Yeah. So I haven't tried going on a ketogenic diet. I think it's a major commitment to make. But from what I saw, you deprive your body from sugar, and I think we're all to some level addicted to sugar. So I assume that the first few days are more challenging. You are more tired. I saw that people report headache and nausea and generally feeling like flu-like symptoms. But then your body gets used to it, and then you don't suffer from these symptoms anymore. And
that sounds like drug withdrawal.
Yeah, I think it's like a sugar withdrawal that we should all do.
Interesting. Okay, so anyways, let's go back to your study. So now we know what ketosis is. We know what the ketogenic diet looks like. You gave these mice this ketogenic diet, high fat, low carb, not so high protein. It had this anti-tumor effect. What else did you find? I know there's some more detail there.
Yeah. So maybe before we go into more details in this study, I think we should mention that ketogenic diet was tried already in the past by many different groups in different kinds of cancer therapy, different kinds of tumor models. And it was shown that in some cases it is beneficial, but in other studies it was actually shown to have an opposite result. And in other cases it was shown to have absolutely no effect. So I think that ketogenic diets can be beneficial for specific cancer types, but not others. So the effect can be different. And I think that the other point that was made by other studies is that for every patient might have different mutations, even if the cancer falls under the same category. So it's not necessary that the one patient will react in a way that will be identical to another patient. So you need to take into account the different genetic alterations and tumor-associated syndromes between different individuals. But what we found in our study is that, so this ketogenic diet is protective, and we asked ourselves, how can a ketogenic diet be protective in colorectal cancer? And we already mentioned that ketogenic diet is inducing the production of ketone bodies in our liver. And these ketone bodies are beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and acetone. And beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB, is the main ketone body. And this is actually also the main source of this alternative energy. So we asked ourselves whether one of these ketone bodies is mediating the protective effect of ketogenic diet. And in order to do so, we had two parallel approaches. One is to give mice these ketone bodies. So these mice were fed a normal diet, the diet that mice are fed regularly, and they were given BHB on top of these regular diets. So they didn't go on a ketogenic diet at all.
And they just eat it? You can just consume it orally?
Yeah, you can consume it orally. You can give it in the drinking water. You can buy it in a form of a drink, in a form of different oils. It's available. It's not a drug, it's a supplement. So it's something that is very easy to obtain. And we found that it was enough to give mice BHB, this ketone body, in order to prevent and treat existing tumors.
So you recapitulated the results from before just by giving them BHB, even though they were having a regular diet with carbs in it.
Exactly. Yeah. So as long as you elevate the levels of BHB either by ketogenic diet feeding or by giving BHB exogenously from outside, you can have the same beneficial effect. We saw that so we did this kind of experiment in mice. We also used a really cool system, which basically allows us to generate mini guts, mini intestines in the lab. So we can take small pieces of the gut of a mouse or of a human patient, and under tightly regulated conditions, we can force these small pieces of tissue to form a 3D structure that resemble the intestinal epithelium. And we can treat these mini guts in culture in the lab with beta-hydroxybutyrate and see a similar response. So in mice, when we induce tumors, BHB treatment leads to protection, and the mice that are treated with BHB develop less tumors. And when we take this BHB and we give it to these small mini guts, these 3D structures, they proliferate less, so they are smaller in size. And this is also something that is beneficial if you're thinking about cancer development. You suppress cellular proliferation.
So is BHB directly modulating some critical part of the cell cycle?
So what BHB is a molecule that is studied extensively. But what we found is that the beneficial effect of BHB is mediated by the receptor of BHB that is called GPR109A or HCAR. And after BHB binds to its receptor, something is happening inside the cell and it leads to reduced proliferation. What we identified is that downstream to this BHB, HCAR, and between this and cellular proliferation, there is another gene, and this gene is called HOPX. And this gene was previously suggested to be a tumor suppressor in different kinds of cancers. So we found that by giving BHB to mice or to intestinal organoids, these mini guts, we can induce the levels of this tumor suppressor, HOPX. And this is enough to protect. So when you treat with BHB or with ketogenic diets, if you give it to mice that don't have HOPX deficient mice, they are not protected anymore. So in order to have the protective effect, we have to have GPR109A, the receptor for BHB, and also HOPX.
I see. So BHB levels go up either because you take it as a supplement or because you go into ketosis because of the ketogenic diet or because you're fasting or something like that. The BHB is going to be sensed by receptors in cells of the gut, and then stuff happens to the genome. Genes turn on, genes turn off, and the net result of that is basically less cell division. Exactly.
Yeah, the cells proliferate less. And if you're thinking about a tumor in the gut, and the cells proliferate less, then the outcome would be smaller tumor. So the tumors will be smaller in size.
Interesting. And so, so you literally said, so BHB, it's a ketone body. It can be used to make energy. Obviously, you can give it to the mice as a supplement. Is this also a human supplement? Like, can you go to the store and buy a bottle of BHB?
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon.
So then you just take it as a health supplement, but your study just came out. So why was it, what do people use it for already?
So people use it for different kinds of reasons. So it has this, people see it as something that is overall healthy. But BHB is used for treatment of different diseases, such as different metabolic diseases. I saw that people take it for acne, different neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's,